So I'm gonna pray, and then a little bit of an introduction to the theme, and we're going to get going. So, what I'd like us to do as we gather, and we've all come from busy days, and just to pause for a moment and to recognise that God's presence is with us. God is with us, and to call to mind one thing today that brought you joy. It might just have been that first cup of coffee, or it might have been something else that happened in your day, or something that happened, or a person that you met, or what was it for you? What was the one thing that brought you joy? God, thank you for your presence with us today in all that we've been doing, all the people that we've met or engaged with. Thank you that in you is joy. And now we give ourselves to this hour to learn together, to be inspired by you. And we pray most of all that your Holy Spirit will speak to and work through us as we gather. Thank you. Amen. So the theme of tonight's prayer space session is permanent prayer spaces. We've got a section on our website about those. If you've noticed over the last few months, we've divided up definitions of websites a little bit, of prayer spaces on the website a little bit, just to give a little bit of clarity about different things that are going on. And so a permanent prayer space, you may be familiar with them. They tend to be a space in a school. It's obviously there all the time. That's why we call it permanent. And it's a space that pupils or staff use as a focal point for prayer. And it might be something that's common to everywhere, or it might be there are these individual ones in classrooms. But what we tend to find is that permanent prayer spaces work best when they're looked after by somebody, when they're curated by somebody who's past the school life, who comes in and helps out. And so tonight we're going to be hearing from two people who are doing that for the schools that they serve. And so I'm going to hand over to Nay, who is going to chat to Sian, and I'll let them introduce themselves and introduce the subject. Where you go.
Can you hear me, everybody? Give me a wave if you can hear me. Hurrah! So, yes, we're going to chat with Sian from Genr8 in Cambridge, which is very exciting. If you don't know who Sian is, you are going to find out, and I'm sure you're going to be inspired by what Genr8 do in Cambridge. They support 10 permanent spaces in 10 primary schools. So they're very experienced. So welcome, Sian. Thank you for sharing with us.
Hello, Naomi. Hello, everybody. Thank you for,
So 10 primary schools, that's no small task. First of all, can you describe the kind of permanent prayer spaces that you are seeing in the schools you go to in the primary schools?
Well, we've got a whole range of different spaces that we have in the primary schools. We've got some with chairs, we've got some with tables, we've got window alcoves, we've got spaces in busy corridors. Basically, you name it, and it can be a permanent prayer space. What we try and do is rather than say, oh, I'm not sure that will work, actually think about how this can work. We know schools are kind of strapped for space sometimes, so we aim to make any space work, and it's a whole range of different spaces that we've got in the 10 schools that we support.
Amazing. So you got 10 different spaces, 10 different schools, they all look different. How do you resource these spaces? Are they the same in every space that you go to? I'm guessing the spaces are different even in those 10 schools. So how do you resource that?
Yes, so lockdown and the pandemic changed what we did, but what we now do is resource all 10 schools with the same materials. We provide absolutely everything that you might possibly need for this display. Right down to the blue tack and the pins and the sellotape, everything, with the idea that it isn't then something else for school staff to do. And we would aim to work really closely with somebody from the local church to actually go in and put this prayer space up. So myself and one of our volunteers called Janet, we put the packs together of everything that's needed for a particular theme. We deliver it to a church volunteer in the community, who's then the one to liaise with the school to go in about putting it up, chatting with the children, highlighting the fact that it's changed. Some of our volunteers go into assemblies with collective worship, and they highlight the fact that the prayer space has changed there. But they're the ones that are the main contact with the school to highlight that this space has happened, and that the theme is different. Would you like to see some pictures of how it's different in different spaces?
Of course, we love photos. We love to be inspired. Thank you. Do you change this every term, and do you decide, or does the school ask, or how do you decide?
We've got a because we've been doing it for a couple of years now, we've got a system where roughly every 4, 5, 6 weeks the space changes, the theme changes. So in autumn term we do harvest and remembrance and then Advent. This term at the moment there is it's called Thinking Positively, and it's all about our unique gifts and talents and the skills that we've all got. And then later on, after half term, we're moving into Lent. And then in the summer term, we do a celebrations theme, which morphs into Pentecost. And then we've got a theme that's all about transition and change, and moving forward and looking at the end of the school year. So we've decided on those changes, rather than the school decide. But here are some pictures of some of the different spaces that we resource in different schools. So you can see we've got window seats, we've got alcoves, we've got spaces in corridors, some of which prove to be quite high traffic areas. You can see some of the seats look like they've been kind of jammed in there. But creating a space where children can sit, if possible, I think is always the best. But we do have some spaces where there just isn't room for a chair or somewhere to sit down. And I think that shows that these spaces can be really flexible, and they do work. They just work in slightly different ways. So that's some spaces. Here are some different spaces. So we've got a couple more windows and some more of the same schools, but with a different theme. And then the picture at the top is of a school that has come on board relatively recently. And what they've decided to do is to make a bigger thing of the prayer space and kind of add to it. So you can see the prayer space theme kind of in the corner, but then they've added this amazing display to kind of go with it, which has been really good to see how the school have taken ownership of it and want to highlight it, want to make it a bigger thing than just a little space. They want to dedicate a whole board to it. So that's been really good to see. And then we've got some final pictures. This is the celebrations that usually happens after Easter at the beginning of the summer term. And again, you can see it's lovely and colourful and looks hopefully like an inviting place to go and sit down and read some of the things that are there and kind of reflect and pray as well in the different spaces that are there. The two pictures that are at the bottom, the picture that's on the left is of a space in a school that is in a very, very busy high traffic corridor. It's on a curve in the corridor, on a bend, and there just isn't anywhere to sit, to have a table even. Everything that we do in that space has to go up on the wall. And you can see that whiteboard, that white rectangle kind of straight ahead. That's actually a whiteboard. And the children are encouraged to write prayers on this whiteboard, write their thoughts and some of the things that come to them when they have seen the activities that are on around the prayer space. And those prayers are then used by the head teacher later on in collective worship assemblies. So although there isn't anywhere to sit and there isn't anywhere to kind of stop at that particular space, the school have made it work for them. So the children might think about that, you know, as they're walking past, and then come back to it later on in the day, or think about it in their classrooms and then go head to the space to write their prayer up. But I hope that shows that even a space that you might initially think, oh, I'm not sure that's going to work, actually, with a bit of thought and a bit of planning, you can make it work. That's that particular school have been involved in permanent prayer spaces for quite a long time now, so much so that it appears on their school development plan. They want it to be a part of what goes on at the school, which is really, really encouraging.
Yeah.
The other picture at the bottom is a picture that's actually in a church. So this particular volunteer, when she takes down the display, she then takes everything that was on the display and puts it up in the church as a way to connect the church body with what is been happening in the school. You know, if there are responses from the children or anything like that, that she takes them as well, is a really good way for the church body to see what's going on in the school as a way of connecting with them.
Yeah. I love the way that you've made it accessible in so many of these schools where they don't have the space for a whole classroom or a week prayer, that actually prayer is part of the everyday school life. In the corridors that they're walking in, they can engage with prayer every day, anytime. But who looks after these spaces, Sian? So you deliver them, you set them up, or you help set them up, but then who looks after them and how does that work?
Okay, so the church volunteer helps to look after them. They're the ones that go in and put these displays up. Some of our church volunteers are clergy, so are quite involved with the life of the school anyway. You know, they're going in to do collective worship assemblies. So they would always look to highlight the fact that the prayer space has changed, referring to it in assemblies, you know, if it's appropriate. And they're the ones that kind of mainly look after the space. We do have some schools though where the church volunteer isn't able to go in so often. So actually the ownership of the space and the kind of the looking after of the space takes place by year sixes. In one particular school, there's a year six collective worship team, and there are 6 of them that help me to put the display up, and they do things like, you know, if it's looking like the post-it notes need replenishing or just needs a bit of a tidy, which can happen in schools, especially when it's a space that we're encouraging the children to use. These year sixes are the ones that are looking after the space and tidying the space, and it has been so noticeable to me, the ownership that they have of the space. They know that it's theirs, and they take so much pride in being part of this team that look after the space and put the new theme up when that's needed. So that's been really, really good to see how those schools have used the pupils to help with the space, so that it's not just something that appears and then disappears, but it's something that they have ownership of.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And yeah, kids learning to lead and take responsibility and ownership is so powerful, such a gift to the school. And so that's an example of a challenge that you've had to overcome. Are there any other challenges that you've had to come that might be useful for anyone else to hear, or have you got some favourite stories you'd love to share with us?
Well, we've had to overcome quite a few challenges. Cambridgeshire is quite rural. Lots of our schools are spread out, so we've had to think really carefully about how we do it with the schools that we've got in the area that we have. Myself and Janet, one of the volunteers that helps me to resource these kits and put everything together, we have learnt by a process of what has worked and what hasn't worked as we've gone along in this. So we now resource all the schools with the same kit. That has made life an awful lot easier. And the other challenge that I think we've been able to overcome is the variety and the flexibility of the resources that we've got. You know, that there's no one set way to put this display up and what it should look like. And sharing photos of this is what this space looks like in other schools has been really helpful to show that message, to show that there are lots of different ways to put this space up to engage and interact with these children. And although we're not directly involved a lot of the time with putting these spaces up, you know, we get to see the result of the space. We get to hear when the school volunteer says, oh, I was stopped by children in the street who have said, when are we going to have a next prayer space? And those kind of interactions, you know, that's what I think we're here to do in as Genr8. We're here to kind of facilitate that link and that relationship between the churches and the schools. So I've been really privileged to see how those relationships have grown. And so much so that some of the schools have got the prayer space on the school development plan.
That's amazing.
which has been really encouraging. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Have you got a favourite story that you want to share that has happened in a prayer space, or a pupil or response? Or
well, we've had so many different things that have happened in prayer spaces, but the child that is quiet, the child that perhaps doesn't say an awful lot in school, coming to a prayer space and writing something down on a post-it note, or sticking something up on the wall, depending on what the activity is. You know, the number of stories that we've been privileged to hear about children that do that the adults then say, I wasn't expecting at all. You know, this child has really come alive in this prayer space. We've got lots of stories like that. I think it would be really difficult to pick just one.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's really interesting as well. You say you've got lots and lots of stories. Someone was commenting, like in the school day, it can be so busy. Do they get a chance to stop at the prayer space if they're not brought into it deliberately as part of the classroom lesson? But if you're getting loads of feedback and lots of stops and engagement, then I guess the answer is yeah.
Yes, yeah, I think that because the children know that they can go to this space, obviously not in the middle of a lesson, but at playtime and at break time, in those kind of transition times, that they know they can ask and they know they can go there. It becomes a part of the school life. It just becomes something that happens in the school day. Yeah. And it's not something that children are going to kind of misbehave. It's a space that children are going to that are really going to get something from it. And once the teachers know that and the staff know that, then I think that happens kind of naturally. And yes, it's a space that's used, and a space that's used really well.
I guess that's the fruit of the culture that you have imparted there, with being consistent over a long time as well. So last question, what would you say if someone is thinking, I want to start a prayer space in school, I want to start, what advice would you give someone?
I would say gather all the resources that you think you could possibly need and more when you go into the school to put the space up, right down to blue tack, pins, sellotape, stapler, post-it notes galore, pencils, pens, pencil sharp, absolutely everything that you need, so that you know you are resourced with all the things that might possibly be needed, and to keep that in school in a box with the prayer space, so that if anything needs to be replenished, everything is there, that you're not trying to find a spare pencil in a school or a pencil sharpener, but it's all there.
Yeah.
And the second thing I would say is to just go for it. I hope that you've seen some of the pictures that I've shown, that whether it's a space with a chair or just an alcove or just a patch on the wall, that it is possible to do something to create a prayer space with whatever space you have got in school, and to make it work is definitely potential there, no matter what the space is.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us and sharing your photos and your experience. We really appreciate that, Sian. We did an interview with Sian a few weeks back, maybe months now, but I'll share the link in the chat as well so that you guys can catch up on it after. We're going to pass back to Tim now. So here, hopefully this will work. We will disappear.
And I will reappear.
Yeah,
exactly. Thank you so much. That's really good. Just dive straight on. There were a couple of other questions that floated past. One is about how can a prayer space be more inclusive, especially to children with autism. We have run prayer spaces here in a school for students with special needs, and I think just make sure that they have time to take in what the prayer space is, so they don't feel rushed into it. We always gave them permission to have a look without having to engage. And many students found that really helpful, just to be able to look around at the thing without any pressure from somebody to feel that they have to actually do something. And the other thing is to be a helpful guide, to be a helper there, be available to them to help explain stuff. It's probably a little bit more we have to go into, but if you want to come back with that question again, we might see if we can collect some wisdom from the breakout rooms later. Next up, I'm going to be talking to Lynsey Hesselgrave. So we've heard about an example of resourcing 10 primary schools across a whole area. Lynsey is, well, I'll let Lynsey tell us a little about who you are and where you work.
Okay, I am, in my general day-to-day role, I'm a pioneer minister. And as part of that, I am a chaplain in a school for 1 day a week in a secondary school with CYO, where Tim used to be the director before he moved on to greater things.
Different things.
Different things, definitely do. And so I'm in school once a week where I have one-to-one time with students, but also kind of looking at the kind of spiritual life of the school where possible. Kind of the theme at the moment is soul, really, of kind of exploring the soul of the school and what that might mean and what being a chaplain might mean for the kind of soul of the school. It seems to be my buzzword this year while I'm there.
So how did that theme arise, and how do you find yourself looking after I think it would be fair to say a very early stages prayer space, but it's a state secondary school, isn't it? It doesn't have a religious foundation. So this is just a standard comprehensive school. How have you ended up looking after a permanent prayer space? And then we'll hear a bit about what it is.
So I've been chaplain in schools since the beginning of 2020, so just before lockdown happened. So it's been quite an interesting experience, which meant that there is a school where CYO that I work for has been in for a number of years. So they have had prayer spaces in the school, they've had remembrance projects and all kinds of things going on. But obviously post-COVID things have been very different. There would have been summer 21, wouldn't it, Tim, that we did a CYO when Tim was working there, ran a reflective sort of COVID space.
Post-COVID lesson, yeah.
Post-COVID, still in the middle of COVID, as it turned out, kind of interactive, prayer space, really. And when we were packing down that, the deputy head just walked in and said, I've been thinking about, with COVID and everything, students that need a space to pray and think, and I've been wondering if we can have some kind of permanent prayer space. And so really from that was just before the summer of 2021. So then it was after the summer thinking about what we could offer. And there have been spaces in libraries in at least one of the other schools in Colchester. So there was a precedent for it. So Tim and I sort of set to work having a meeting. And I think the ideal was to find some kind of room space. There were some possibilities, but in the end it came to the library, And the manager of the library was really happy to kind of share the responsibility of curating it. Totally got the whole sort of ethos of it, very happy to host it in the library. So it was a challenge to sort of find the right space where it would be sort of tucked away enough for people to have some privacy and that, but also visible enough so that there was not too much mischief going on.
So what does it, so kind of how have you found a space, and like what's the space like in the library?
Yeah, there was two options, and we're possibly going to move to the second. What was the second option? It's a 2-level library, and so there was a space just tucked down in the lower level as you went down the stairs, just sort of tucked where the 2 levels are, where you could see it. It was tucked away enough to be able that the library manager could see it, but students who are just using the LRC are not kind of peering in on it all the time. And with a little bit of moving some bookshelves and that, we could make it into a kind of little snug space with some bean bags, and there was a sort of a shelf area where we could place kind of not as bright and wonderful and shiny as the primary ones, but it would get trashed a lot quicker, I think. But where there was space where we could place the activities. So what happens is, because the LRC is used during the lunchtime for students to come, so that's when we have the space available. All the instructions will remain up, and then the manager will put the items for the press, so things like this and palm jars and little blocks with what's your life priorities and things like that on. So those will get put out at lunchtime, and then students can come and
so I think we describe those as sort of self-directed spiritual kind of resources.
Absolutely.
Reflective resources.
Yeah. So I called it soul space rather than a prayer space, so that it is those sort of reflective activities, and people are invited to use it as a reflective space, or to pray, or to ponder. There's some mindful colouring and that kind of thing. But
you're now running a small group in it. So tell us how did that happen, and what does it do?
So what's been really interesting is I think particularly in a secondary school, that I think I find it in ministry generally, but in the secondary school it's kind of, I find what works for me is the principle of kind of being there and being around, and then going with where the energy is. So when someone invites you, you're there, and then someone invites you to do something, go with it, rather than try and push and generate things necessarily. So that energy was there to have this invitation to put the space in. And then what has happened since then is the pastoral manager that I work with in the school, who organises all my sort of one-to-ones, she is very, when she first came, and I said that with CYO we look at the kind of emotional and spiritual life of the school, she was completely up for this and really into it, and not a Christian herself, but really keen for this kind of holistic thing to happen. And then in conversation with her and one of the deputy heads, just because we were planning some sessions for another reason, she said, I'd love to have a space where students could drop in kind of outside of like the school day, maybe an after school club. And I had, with our soul space, I'd been thinking it's a real challenge for students to use it, because they can only get up there at lunchtime, and they're going to use the library, and they've got about half an hour lunch. I've always sort of thought it would be really great to have a space where we can use the soul space, gather students for a session. Difficult to bring them out of lesson to do that. But as soon as she said an after school club, and I knew her interest in kind of this holistic sort of care, including sort of spiritual care students, I said, well, we've got this soul space in the library. We could actually turn that into an after school club. So we started a few weeks ago. We've just had one student so far. I couldn't be there today because I wasn't well, or at the end of not being well with what. So I wasn't allowed to go to school. So I missed it today, but we have had one student to start with, and a few are starting to sign up, where we're going to use the prayer space activities, plus just have games and crocheting and chatting and whatever. But we've had one student go through it so far. In the last couple of weeks, I've been using some of the priorities activity, and the shredder is very popular there. Unfortunately, it's too popular, and sometimes they shred old books in the LRC. So
unintended consequences.
Yes, our library manager, when he's got books that need to go, he tends to try and give them to students to take them home and read, but it has been known that they've then taken the pages out and shredded them because it's really cathartic. But anyway, we've done the proper shredding activity at our after school soul space. So hopefully, we're just hoping, because that pastoral manager has a really good relationship with students. She's one of those that they really go to chat to. But she's been raising the questions around, what do you think spirituality is with this student that we've started to see so far. So it's absolutely fascinating just to be kind of facilitating this thing that's going on with actually members of staff wanting to do stuff. So our LRC manager is a really pastoral guy, so it's kind of, by having the soul space there, it's facilitating him to be able to direct students. He's in one case had a student who was brought up during the day because there was nowhere else to take them. They were really in a bad way. There was nowhere else to take them. Took them up to the LRC, and he just got all the soul space stuff and put it on the table for her, and she just worked her way through it on her own. So it's enabling him to do a bit of that kind of pastoral care, and it's enabling this pastoral manager who's really interested in spirituality herself to actually explore it with some of the students. So I'm finding it absolutely fascinating. I just sit around and everything sort of happens. One
of my questions is going to be, how does this work in a school that doesn't have a religious character? And it seems to be surprising how it works in a school without.
Yeah, really surprising, I suppose, because Christian staff are work their ways of being Christian staff in schools in appropriate ways. So just to give, in their case, to give them a chance to express something of spirituality in a way that's accepted. The senior leadership team are all up for this and think it's a great idea, and that, so it gives them a chance to just with that in an appropriate way to do that. But then to see a member of staff who's actually is interested in just thinking about that as well, that's been absolutely fascinating. And I think that sense that there is no sort of agenda for it, because it's not a church school or that, it makes it all the more kind of interesting in one sense that there is that's also a fantastic way of being too. But this is just really fascinating to observe what's emerging, because it's kind of this authentic thing that is just happening out of
it sounds to me like
contrivance.
Yeah, it sounds to me like what you're able to do is give people permission to be more spiritual than they might have been otherwise. Someone's asked, in your context, is there much religious diversity? Do those of non-Christian religious traditions also interact with the spaces?
There is a bit, there is some diversity in the school, and the space is available, I suppose, because it's not a specifically sort of Christian space, it's that more sort of reflective space. That one of the stepping stones of this is that both that pastoral manager and the head would like to see, they'd like to see a multi-faith prayer room, which would be managed properly by the room, and I would be part of managing that. There is, between the senior leadership team, there is a kind of a sort of a very, very tiny room stroke, perhaps a cupboard, that is there's discussions about that kind of keeps coming up as a possible, and it's just not quite got there. But that is there, this kind of actually could there be a space that Muslim students could pray and things like that as well. So it's a real work in progress, but it's this sort of stepping stone of what would happen if we just moved, added a little bit, put this little presence in and see what comes up next and see what happens next.
I feel like we ought to invite you back this time next year and go, so what's happened in the last year? And there'll probably be a load of stories, but for now, Lynsey, thank you so much. That's just appreciate it. It's still a work in progress, but it does seem to be doing something amazing seems to be happening in that school as a result of your presence and the presence of this space. So thank you. We're going to give you a chance to chat among yourselves in a breakout room. I'm just going to suggest two questions, which one starts with I and one starts with Q, really. Well, really is I. What's inspired you for that you've heard so far? So you might like to share that with what's the thing that's inspired you, or what's stuck with you, or what's the thing that made you feel that you'd like to do something. And Q, what's the question? Are there any questions that you still have from that? And share those around in the breakout rooms. We're going to have about 10 or 11 minutes in breakout rooms. We're going to aim to wrap it up about 20 past. So I'm going to let Nay press the button, and I'll see you all in about 10 minutes. We've got what I'd like. We could try and do some feedback. I think one of the things I said in the group that I was in is there was something really interesting that was said. I said, could you just drop us an email, because we'd love to hear. We wouldn't want it to go to waste. The thing that I heard, which was inspired me, was somebody who's running a prayer club. And I wonder whether others of you are running prayer clubs. It seems to be a thing that is beginning to happen, and I just think we need to be aware of it and maybe circulate some of those stories, share some of those stories, and perhaps encourage others to do things like that. So as we begin to draw this to a close, if you've got a bit of feedback, something that you particularly would like to share with people, stick it in the chat, jot it down in the chat, so that we can all benefit from that. If there are any questions you think it would be worth, any questions you think would be worth us asking of Sian or Lynsey or other people that we recognise, do drop them down in the chat. I'm going to waffle on for a bit while you're doing that, just in case there are some burning questions right now. So there's been a conversation in one of the breakout rooms between Silvana and somebody called Judy. So bless you both. So there's a link to the Facebook page for the prayer spaces in schools in Malta, who we are on these calls regularly, doing an amazing job right across Malta. You might like to go and see what they're doing. They're creating some very inspiring ideas. They've done some stuff around literacy, so incorporating prayer spaces into teaching around literacy and that sort of thing. So there's a link there if you'd like to see that. Any Lego prayer space activities? I think we have. Nay, have we got some Lego? I think we've got a Lego prayer space activity. That should definitely be a thing. Yeah. I was going to ask if people have done prayer space stuff in the playground. Yes. So Francis, we've just recorded a video from a school in Walsall that has got a kind of permanent outdoor prayer space in a covered area of the playground, which is used every lunchtime by a different year group each lunchtime. So that video is on our YouTube channel. I don't know when they can find us a link for that. But so those sorts of things are starting to happen. And we're going to talk about outdoor prayer spaces next time. So on the 26th, 7th of March. Hang on. I'll just check the date here. It's the 27th of March is the next prayer spaces session. And we're going to be thinking about outdoor prayer spaces and how we can do prayer in the outdoors, which isn't just about moving what we do inside, outside. It's about a whole different way of engaging with nature and helping children and young people to discover a sense of awe and wonder in the natural environment. So that's what's going to happen next time on the 27th. We've got a labyrinth set up in one of our primary schools. Wow. Okay, we're all jealous now. We've got a prayer shed playground. Yeah, we came across a prayer shed in Stockton as well. So prayer sheds, great ways of just creating a prayer space outdoors. There's some Lego one, some great things popping up in the chat now. Someone said, does anyone have parents involved in their prayer spaces? Does anybody have parents involved? I'll look for one. Is there one person that would like to offer? If you do, just unmute yourself and dive in if you've got parents involved in your prayer space. I'm looking for an unmute. Okay.
Hi.
Yes, it's Rosie.
Yeah, in our school we have a parent how can I say this? A parent prayer group. And so the parent, they're not really involved in the prayer space, but there's a set of parents that meet regularly to pray. And that's quite exciting. They meet twice a term, and it's facilitated by another parent, but it got started by a teacher at the school. So they meet sort of twice a week, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person.
Yeah, parent prayer groups are a great thing to encourage. But we've had members of our church have come and helped out with prayer spaces. Always good to get people from the church involved. Obviously, they need to be DBS checked and safe to work with children and all that stuff that you already know about. But fantastic way of including the church in your prayer space, and also helping some of the young people to meet the church. That can be really, really helpful. So wrapping it up then. So if you've run a permanent prayer space of any kind, or you've got something, you've begun to do one, and you've got an insight to share or a question to ask, please do drop us an email. What we'll try and do is put all that together into something useful and send it. We can send it out to you if you're part of our mailing list. So if you're not yet on our mailing list, click on the sign up to mailing link that's on our website, and we can send you a bit of news. Next prayer space session is the outdoors. I'm also interested in prayer spaces in FE and further education, so that's in sixth form colleges or FE colleges. So if you're involved in any of those, I'd love it if you drop me a line, because I want to start to research some of the things that are going on there. The FE sector is can be a bit of a hidden sector. It's not such an easy one for churches to be involved in, but we know there's some good stuff going on there, and so we're trying to encourage people who are involved in further education to have a go. That is about it for today. I said we'd finish by p:30, which we will. Massive thanks to Sian from Cambridge for helping us just hear a little bit more about the prayer spaces that she's supporting across Cambridgeshire. I think we put their link in the chat earlier, and also thank you to Lynsey, who is pioneering that amazing space in the state school, and people seem to be coming out of the woodwork and being given permission to express some of their spiritual quest in that. I'm going to close with just a moment to pray and to thank God. And then if you'd like to stay on, we're going to stick around for another 10 minutes for those that would like to. If there's people you'd like to talk to, got questions that you'd still like to answer. If Sian and Lynsey are happy to stick around for another 10 minutes, that would be fabulous. But if you want to go at p:30, then you're welcome to go. And thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next time. So let's just pause for a moment to be still again. Time can go very quickly when there's a lot happening. And what's the one thing, again, that you want to take away from this? And as we've done before, just ask you to think about a young person or a child, perhaps a teacher, that you know well, as representative of the children and young people that we're serving. And as you think about them, we pray. God, thank you for the work that you call us to do. Thank you for the opportunity to help children, young people, and teachers to explore prayer and to encounter you. We ask your help as we make space for prayer in schools. And we pray that you would work in the lives of children and young people and staff across our nation. In Jesus' name, amen.